This is LegalTech Podcast. My name's Graham Brown. We are joined in the studio by Cherilyn Tan. Cherilyn, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Asia Law Network. I know about you. I've known about you for a while because I see your face around Platform E as well because you're on the posters here.
Yes.
So you have a presence here. But I don't actually see you a lot in Platform E. You're out and about, aren't you?
Yes.
Doing presentations.
A lot.
Did one today.
That's part of my job, actually,
Right.
my everyday job.
Right. Is it? Do you find yourself out pitching and presenting most of your time?
Yes. I think that's about 50% of my time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You enjoy it? Are you good at it?
I'm an introvert by nature,
on.
but I'm a trained extrovert, so I'm good.
Right. You've got outside of your comfort zone.
Yes. And
Right.
I actually, when I'm pitching something that I'm passionate about, like my product and what we do,
Yeah.
it gets really simple, and I find that energy from within, so
Right.
it's okay.
Yeah, and you had energy when you came into the studio today. You were like static electricity flowing off you, so I feel it today.
Yeah.
So an Asia Law Network, we'll talk about that, talk about the genesis of that, and then, the problem that you're solving. Are you a lawyer by trade?
No, I'm not a lawyer by training.
Right.
In fact, I'm solving this problem from a user perspective.
Right.
I'm an accountant by training,
Mhm.
technologist by training, a design thinking person by training,
Right.
but I'm not a lawyer by training.
An accountant, technologist, and design thinker.
Yes.
What did you do at university?
Accounting.
Accounting. So did you do CFA and...
I didn't go into doing CFA, but I know kind of like the process because
Right.
I've always been dealing with my own finances, running businesses, and doing my own
Right.
numbers. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd still be doing that now if you were in
Yes.
that. I see it on LinkedIn now. Like I think this week was the week everybody qualified, right? They did their exams. And I've got all the updates. I'm CFA too. Got to do number exactly. It's endless, isn't it?
You got to shout about it. Yes.
Yeah. So you trained as an accountant.
Yes.
Did you, just out of interest, because I'm always curious about what makes an entrepreneur as well. At what point did you think you were an entrepreneur? Was it straight out of the gate? Were you an entrepreneur when you were younger?
I would like to say family plays a part. So
Uh-huh.
my family comes from a business background.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always about taking some kind of risks and always doing something that's different,
Mm-hmm.
not being afraid of competition. I mean, when one cafe opens, the other cafe doesn't think about how many other cafes out there,
Right.
but, they start and try to be better than the others. So I think a lot of that spirit of not being fearful came from family.
Right.
But
Were
at the
they an
same point,
entrepreneurial family? What were they doing as a business?
my mom was into logistics, and now she's into
Right.
beauty things where
Run her own business?
Yes, running
Right.
his own business. Yeah.
So that made an impression upon you, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Did
She's
you-
always working.
But when you were an accountant, did you think this was going to be it? Or did you think, I've got to go and do my own thing?
I did have a go at trying to be an accountant.
Right.
In fact, very interestingly, straight out of school, I was asked to go for an interview with one of the MNC pharmaceuticals.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought, we need an accountant, so let's interview this lady. And immediately after the interview with the HR person, she's like, I would like to introduce you to my sales director.
All right, where's this going? Right.
Clearly, I think I have to do a bit more than just accounting.
Right.
So
But you could
selling,
probably sell, I
pitching.
think, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's talk about Asia Law Network. And we have your pitch deck here. If we can just kind of flick that up on the screen. So I know you describe yourself as, on one of the slides later on, as the WebMD of legal services. You stand by that? Is that what you go out and tell people? Or does that just happen to be one slide thrown in there?
Yeah, that is one of the things we do.
Right,
So
okay.
there are a few pillars. We're B2B to C platform.
Yeah.
So you realize that on the surface, I think a lot of people know us as the place to go to when you have legal service, when you have legal needs.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find a lawyer there. You can find other services or solutions that are catered for anybody. And you can find, free reading about, the law across the region. But what we also do on the back end is actually to help the law firms and the accounting firms to work better.
Right.
To save a lot more time on the administrative tasks so that they can spend more time client-facing.
Yeah. You've got a whole suite of services that sit on the back end there, which is sort
Exactly.
of later in the pitch deck.
Exactly.
Where did this come from? You said this was from a personal user perspective. What's the pain point? Where did it all start, Cherilyn?
So my previous business was a creative agency. So I actually co-own a creative agency when I was 25 to 28.
Creative agency means what? Design?
Design.
advertising
Yes,
work?
exactly. So through the line advertising, so we even buy media for clients. We do strategic campaigns, integrated campaigns in those days where social media is not always, the first thing people look at. So I used to do that, and we had a lot of very robust clients, and it was at a point where I was going through some health issues and I needed to restructure the company, get more investors, shareholders, and also to expand the business, have new talents brought in. And I needed legal services at that point in time to draft all these documents, negotiate contracts. And it was really difficult for me to find lawyers.
Why?
Maybe I can pose that question to you. If you have a legal need, where would you go other than Stephen?
Right, yeah, exactly. A big shout out to Stephen. He'll come up again in our presentation. Where would you go? I mean, I have lawyer friends, but I feel almost afraid to ask them.
Exactly.
Because, oh no, I'm going to ask them a really stupid question and they charge $500 an hour or whatever. I'm going to ask them about a form.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Cherilyn, tell me. What's the answer?
So that is actually one of the biggest pain points in terms of navigating the legal industry. There's no standard way of approaching lawyers, and there's no standard ways that you get charged. In terms of pricing, right? So what we've done actually on Asia Law Network is that we've created this platform called Quick Consult. Basically, it's an automated service which allows anybody to ask any questions, whether they think it's stupid or not, for $49.
Right.
And within 2 days.
Right.
That means
$49 Sing dollars, right? So that's about 35, 40 US, right?
Yes. And we have that service across Asia.
Okay.
So if you have any legal needs across, like for example, today you want to set up in Thailand or in Indonesia, you can easily get to a lawyer for $49.
Right. They're going to give me an answer.
Yes.
For $49.
So we cap it about 3 questions, and in the form filling process, you actually describe your background and some of the facts of the case. So that process is automated, and that allows lawyers to then get back to you really quickly. Because in the traditional way of approaching lawyers, you can imagine, right? Call up the firm, the secretary or an administrator picks up, they have no clue what you're asking. And then they'll have to fix you a meeting with the lawyer for next week or next month. And by that time, it's just a simple question. And you don't want to have to bug your friends all the time for it.
No.
Right?
No.
It's like going to see a doctor. You don't have to see your friends.
Right.
In fact, sometimes it's embarrassing.
Exactly.
So you don't want to be telling your friends all your problems.
Okay.
So this is a very arm's length way of, people approaching legal services and having that very open and standard approach.
All right. So any legal services?
Yes.
Is it just for business owners?
No, it's any legal services.
Right.
Yes.
So family law, contract law.
Yes.
Everything.
Everything. Business advice, anti-competition, anything. And even negotiation if you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So let's say as a case study example, a couple of examples. I set up a business with a business partner. It didn't work out. A little bit of a not so amicable divorce, so to speak.
Yes.
Can I then say, okay, what do I do in this situation?
Yes,
Asia Law Network?
absolutely.
Yeah. How would I actually type that in terms of, you say 3 questions. Did I have to have specific questions, or is it I just explain the case like I said?
There is a facts of the case part and then the questions part.
Right.
For some people, they already know the questions. For those who don't, a specific outcome they're looking for.
Yeah.
And lawyers deal with this day in, day out. Right. And these information at the back of their head.
Okay.
The key is just having a standard and easy way for them to get that across to the users.
So I don't have to have the final question, which is, okay, no, you asked that question, therefore you discount. You can be a bit more sort of vague, and I guess a lot of people are as well.
Yes. Yeah.
All the way up to family law, for example, or even like, for example, tenancy law here in Singapore.
All there. So
can I have somebody look at a tenancy agreement for me?
You can look at specific clauses.
Oh, okay.
So because to read the entire contract, it's sometimes too long. So what happens is we ask users to copy and paste, for example, the specific clause that they're looking at, and then you can actually get an answer from the lawyers.
Right. As an example, so having just moved here to Singapore, I'm not familiar with property law, contract law here.
Yeah.
And it's very specific as well. I don't know my rights as a tenant, for example. I'm actually a property landlord in the UK, and I know the law very well, but it's very different here in Singapore. So let's say my landlord puts in a tenancy agreement with a clause in place which says like, I can move in, but I can only own this one type of fridge brand, whatever. I mean, I'm joking.
Yes.
Could I then put that in there and say, is this legitimate? Can you give me some advice on that?
Yes. So what you can do is we have a trial of like articles on landlord and tenancy agreements on our platform. So if you go to asialawnetwork.com, under the blog segment or resources segment, you basically see all kinds of law that's written in articles that's easy to understand. We also have infographics for readers to read about basic laws, right? Or basic situations and circumstances that you might face. And from there, all our articles are actually co-written with lawyers.
Right.
Yes. So we're the only platform.
Are you paying them to write those, or are they writing them because it's then their sort of marketing on the platform?
Yes, it is. It is sort of their give back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in Asia, we're very big on community.
Yeah. Well, they got to do pro bono as
exactly.
well. So. Okay.
Exactly.
Interesting. We'll talk about your journey in a minute, but I want to ask you a question because it sounds like a solution I could use right here, right now. Why wasn't it around earlier? We live in a world where, Uber's not new and Grab's not new, Airbnb's not new. People are used to this idea of creating easy access to skills and assets that have been locked into systems.
Yeah.
Why is it taking until now for this to happen, and why you?
Okay, so I think the legal industry is something that moves a lot slower than other industries, like delivery, you have your ride-hailing industry. So legal industry, we've been around for 3.5 years, close to 4 now, and we have always been trying to push the boundaries a little more each time, but work with regulators to make sure that this is sustainable. Because what we don't want to do is to damage the reputation of the lawyers.
Yeah.
And we don't want to, ruin what they have built thus far. And they are actually very receptive. It's just that, of course, with anything that requires regulation, it's important that we also do it with a sense of responsibility. That's why I mentioned that all articles are written with lawyers. You can have platforms like WebMD that are written maybe with doctors and maybe not, or researchers, but with law, it's very specific. And you want that article to be updated when you're reading this 10 years down the road. And how we do that is to enable lawyers to actually update it on the back end easily. So if they realize the article is outdated, they could actually post an update.
They can directly edit it themselves.
Exactly. So there's a lot of responsibility involved when you're dealing with someone's lives. And especially legal advice is not something that anybody can give. Even I am not qualified to do that.
Right.
And
lawyers care a lot about this, more than the average person, right?
Exactly.
They built up a career, like you say.
Exactly. So to build what we've done takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of persuasion. It takes a lot of market educating. We have to educate both the legal industry as well as the users. So it's a huge task.
Yeah.
And so we're doing it, in a very sustainable manner. And we want to make sure that we do it in a responsible way too.
Okay.
And that's why I would say there are people who try to solve the problem, but in a different way. So I guess that's where me not being a lawyer helps, because I see things from a different perspective.
Right, but in what way would you see that a lawyer wouldn't see it?
So I believe such platforms have been started by lawyers or legally trained people before, but they will not see it from a tech perspective. They will not see it from a process management perspective. Maybe more for clients coming to see them, as a service, but not so much the other parts that we're trying to solve.
Right.
That builds the entire ecosystem that allows what we do today possible. I mean, we have 40% of Singapore's lawyers on the platform, and now we're growing across the region. And from 3 years ago, it's been about relationship building. It's about getting people to trust us. It's about having a trustworthy place that people can go to. Because legal is huge. It's
not
as of
going
now,
away.
it's not going away. And as of now, it's at a $200 billion industry in Asia alone.
Right.
And you're talking about ride-hailing at $80 billion in 2025. Right now, it's huge already.
Okay, so before we look at the journey, I'm going to role play. I'm a lawyer. I've studied very hard for many years, and it cost my family a lot of money to get to this position. And you're talking about charging my time out of $49.
Yeah.
So come on. Like, you know,
Okay.
I've got to put a 0 on the end of that before this makes sense for me. How do you, because I imagine some lawyers are going to think that, or maybe that's their knee-jerk reaction when they actually realize what the reality is. Can you sort of put me in my place?
Okay, so I'll talk about first the macro numbers, statistics, right? In UK and Australia, let's talk about very similar markets. Developed, legal systems are in place. Every one lawyer in UK, Australia serves about 460 to 480 population.
Right.
In Singapore, one lawyer serves 1,150 population. Which
about 3
means,
times, yeah.
Yes, there's a huge market out there that's not served. And at this point in time, if you ask any 10 persons or 100, right, only 5 to 10% of people actually use legal services. Which means that the entire market is still not exposed to using legal services. Imagine that pie growing. We can easily double the pie or triple the pie if we find the right way to solve the problem, the delivery of legal services. And that's super important. And also, so if you scale that down, right? So after I've looked at the numbers, if you look at how lawyers have been in structures, it's always been just legal on its own silo. And if you look at other industries, they have evolved, right? Accounting has evolved to advisory and a lot of other services. And that's where you see some of the big accounting firms like going into legal. Yeah. So there is going to be a change in the industry and how the industry delivers professional services. And that's why we never limited ourselves to just, having the tools available to lawyers, but also to other professional services, because it helps build that ecosystem together.
Interesting. Great. And I love the fact that you say that only 5 to 10% of people use legal services. Yes. I wonder, what does that figure compare to? I mean, it's maybe difficult to get the numbers, but roughly, just freestyle on this one, to people who actually need them.
Everyone needs a lawyer.
Really?
6 times in their lives, at least.
Okay.
So one, of course, when you're buying a flat, you're getting married, you're doing your wills, you need to do a will again after you get married, because...
And you're going to die as well, so somebody else is going to have to read it.
Exactly. So there's so many things in your life that needs law.
Okay.
And the key is that process is not as efficient as it could be. Imagine, right? If you're sick, you just go to the GP, the local GP near your street. And everyone has at least visited the doctor 20 times in their lives. Yeah. And that gap needs to be solved, because if you have bigger problems, then they refer you to a specialist. But that doesn't mean that the doctors are not earning enough.
Yeah.
They actually earn quite a bit, even being a GP, right? So there is a market for everybody and for many different kinds of law. And I think that has to be, looked into. And that's what we're doing. Yeah.
Do you think that there are sort of cases or common cases where people would use a specific type of law a lot more if they knew it was more accessible? So in company laws, especially for startup founders, is a good example, because we're busy. You don't have the cash flow. I'm not going to waste $500 an hour on a lawyer who's going to come in and just hand me off to their junior, all that sort of stuff, right?
Yes.
That's how it works. Are there other sort of cases that where people say, they should be using this stuff, but it's just not accessible?
Yes. I think startups is one big issue here in Asia, because all of us, it's run by a lot of SMEs, right? And every business would have accountants, but not every business has a lawyer.
Yeah,
so
very
that's
true.
Interesting, because actually lawyers can add a lot of value, which they're not aware of. Lawyers can help you structure. Lawyers can help you, figure out what are industry norms. What is the percentage of commission you should be getting in this kind of deal, for example? And these are the things that actually we should consult the lawyers first before even going to term sheet or negotiation or signing of agreements. But often that is, misunderstood. We always go to lawyers after we've decided what to do.
Right, after the problem's created.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're trying to change that too. So into preventive law, rather than just, when you have a huge problem, you go to a lawyer. Of course, your experience is going to be bad, because at that point in time, you're kind of deep in trouble, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So,
for example, listeners, viewers who are raising funds, that issue is that often they get a term sheet given to them by the other party, and then they'll go and speak to their angel friend or their mate who also has a startup.
Yes.
not often the best advice legally, is it? I mean, a lawyer can give an independent view on that. And if they knew, they could just ask that question and say, hey, look, investors have put these terms in, or, you know, is this the right way to structure it? You can start that conversation with a lawyer, right?
Yes, exactly. In fact, for any startups, I would suggest book a lawyer's time for at least an hour or two.
Right.
And
not just about raising funds or everything?
Everything.
Why would I need it then?
You need to know your risk in the business. Some people don't even realize that, for example, the business can be done. I mean, imagine you spend, you know, months thinking about an idea, implementing it, executing it, and then you realize, oh no, this doesn't qualify.
Right, legally.
Exactly.
Like my moonshine business down here selling alcohol. I didn't realize it had to be regulated.
Right. I'm sure you don't want to be on tape.
All right, I get your point. Well, 1 or 2 hours worth it. I mean, you know, for $100.
Exactly. Or even for, so the more senior partners usually charge between 600 to 1,000. But I think, you know, they're more than happy to share an hour with you. And then, you know, if you pay them another hour, they'll sit down with you for 2 hours. Yeah. And that's enough, because if you go there with a very clear idea on what you want to do and run it through with them, be very specific, it's very easy to know what you should do, what your risks are, and then try to build upon that, because you don't want to go in blind doing any business. And a lawyer is actually one of the best partners you can have. Yeah.
I think as well that, you know, it's not necessarily the issue about profitability, because it can be more profitable to do a lower cost job for a lawyer if it was, like you talked about, the delivery was a lot more effective, right?
Yes.
And we look, for example, if you step outside of law and look at freelancing, if, for example, I wanted a piece of code written and I went to Upwork as an example, I spend, you know, a lot of time finding the right people and then explaining what the problem is, and then I don't know if they can deliver. So, and then they charge, because maybe it's they're like, you know, they'll just get that for this week. They'll charge me many hundreds of dollars. As a flip side, there are other models, like, for example, at the very other end, you've got like Fiverr, where I know that if I go to this guy, he does like CSS coding and he does it specifically for this, and he charges, you know, he might charge $50 for that. But for him, it's more profitable because the delivery is really easy. He knows he does 10 of those a day, rather than spending hours and hours like on the delivery side, like on Upwork, as an example. So I think, you know, getting across the point that the real cost for a lawyer or anybody that's highly skilled and sells their time is the delivery, isn't it? And that's what you're dealing with. You're taking that pain of delivery out and helping them sort of deliver a more profitable price point.
Exactly. And what we're trying to do here is really also to train the lawyers to be more focused on their clients instead of actually just focusing on the papers.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's refreshing. Let's have a look at your journey, Cherilyn. Okay. So if we flip back into the pitch deck, here we go. 3 years.
Yes.
When did you start it on your own, or were there co-founders?
I started on my own.
On your own. Okay. How did that feel when you started out on your own?
So one of the hustles I had to go through is finding good team. Yeah. Especially in the field of legal tech. It's not like a sexy, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's not compared to being like a, you know, all-powerful partner in a law firm, right?
Exactly. Or you know, some of the other startups that does a lot of high volume. We focus a lot on higher margin work, but you know, lower volume. So different kind of startup altogether. Yeah. And so it's really difficult to find people who are equally passionate about disrupting, not really disrupting, facilitating this industry. Yeah. Because we're trying to work with them to create the changes, right? And so that took a long time. So even till today, like we're growing in different expertise and skills, and we're getting the right people for all these different pillars in our business. So
how did you convince those people to come across? You know, you weren't a Facebook, or you weren't, you know, an Uber in that sense. What was obviously you tried different pitches. What did you find that worked for those people from the legal background?
Our first team is not in legal.
Right. Yeah. They were technical people?
Yes.
Okay.
Tech.
So how did you get them excited about law?
It's the vision and the mission. We had a really big vision. And I wasn't sharing this in the deck because the bigger vision that we have, really it's about connecting every trusted professional to people. And we're starting that with law, because that's the, you know, if you think about levels of trust and seriousness. That's the
Yeah.
epitome, right? I mean, there are other professionals, of course, like doctors, but there are many people who are in the medical platform business. Yeah. So we talk about vision. There's actually a lot to do in an industry that has not seen a lot of progress in terms of technology. So if you look at the technology that law firms are using, if you look at technologies that they are using day to day, the tools that they're using to read or update their industry, it's really, there's a huge gap and there's a lot to do. So people who are excited about that, it's hard to come by, right? And that's why the process took quite a long time, because there's so much of this ecosystem we need to deal with. So one thing is the regulators. Second thing is the legal industry themselves, the lawyers themselves. We have the students, the law students, the schools, the people who actually give them the courses for their upgrading, who else? The pro bono community, which we are working a lot with. There's so many parts.
So much to do.
Yeah.
And I know you've talked about accountants as an example, and they've evolved a lot. You talk about like the professional services firms, like I suppose the KPMGs and all those kind of people who became sort of more management consultants, and now they're probably going back into law, right?
Yes.
So, and then you have, like, on the other end, you have the software services like Xero as an example. So they all exist. And then you talk about medicine, which is heavily regulated too, by comparison. I know we talked about the WebMD part of it as well. How is it that by comparison, law and medicine, it seems that in the medical community, they've made more advances. They've seemed to have done a lot more, even though very, very similar. And, very, very highly skilled, highly paid professionals who, don't have to risk it all, give it all away.
That's because the medical industry has opened up a long time ago. So if you look at the medical council, they set prices on consulting. Yeah. So for example, a short consultation, you have to pay 50 to 80, a longer one, 80 to 120. So they've actually set standards which every single doctor has to adhere to. And that hasn't happened in the legal industry. Yeah. So people are afraid because 8 out of 10 people don't dare to step into a law firm because of this particular reason.
Interesting.
And because of that, no one goes to a lawyer as much as they go to a doctor. Even if I have a flu and I know exactly what it is and the doctor is going to give me the same medicines, I'll still go to a doctor because, I want that assurance that's okay. And I know that I won't be charged, an exorbitant amount, which doesn't make sense. Yeah. Lawyers, on the other hand, are also very thankful for some kind of a SOP, because they realize that, hey, if I actually can set price limits and, service limits, that's totally fine too. So that's why there's this fixed fee platform that we work with in Australia called Legally Yours. They are there just to serve the fixed fee lawyers, right? To get you to a fixed fee legal service.
And how about I know you talk about the pricing part, but how about the human angle for a lawyer? That, there must come a time either at the early on when they're starting out in law and they realize, actually, I thought I was going to talk a lot more to people. I'm just dealing with paperwork. Yeah. And then maybe later on when they've kind of done it all, or they may be made partner level, and now they feel a bit removed from all that. What sort of conversations have you had with lawyers where they've, talked about real human contact in what they do?
Okay, so with regards to law, it's very similar to accounting. When I first did my internship at one of the Big Four, and I simply asked the question, what makes a partner? And they told me, that's the youngest partner, and they said, he brings in the deals. I was like, okay, but for the next 3 years, we're supposed to be, doing these numbers which have nothing to do, for example, with client interaction, and so that is actually a gap in the professional services segment, and that's changing in the accounting segment. And one thing we've actually learned from the lawyers is that with preparation, for example, the quick consult service, it allows the lawyers, the more junior ones, actually to prepare for their answers. So they train to be better client-facing lawyers, and they can do that, from early on in their practice rather than later.
Good.
So that's changing.
Okay, good. I want to talk about your team as well.
Yes.
So maybe we can just flick up the advisor. I'm just scroll down to your team of advisors first. This is a very good pitch deck, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because straight away when I was flicking through your pitch deck, I noticed Stephen there. So I know Stephen well from Japan.
Yes.
So he was a Singaporean lawyer who moved to Japan seeking new adventures, even though he's very still, like through Asia Law Network, very much connected to Singapore. How was it getting these people on board? What kind of people have you got in your advisory board? And, you know, what was kind of like for you the key message for getting them as a part of the journey? Because they must have a lot of offers.
Yes. The important thing is they really see my drive and motivation to make this happen and to make this work. They've been through with me all the ups and downs in the last 3.5 to 4 years. And
did you know them before?
So interestingly, I like to say that this is a calling, right? Because before I started ALN, I didn't actually know many lawyers, although now
that might have been a good thing, you know.
On a call. And so Shashi was a friend, a longtime friend from before. I think we engaged him for some services earlier on for structuring. And Ying, I knew through a friend as well. Actually, Stephen also through their friends. But Prof Tan is actually my professor in social entrepreneurship when I was in SMU. And he happened to, to be a lawyer, and he read law, and he's also sitting on a chair of now it's renamed, it's the Corporate Secretaries, the association. Institute for Corporate Secretaries.
So when you're speaking to people like this and working with them, do you ever sort of get that imposter syndrome that, you're speaking about law and these are some of the most qualified or knowledgeable lawyers in the field? Do you ever sort of feel, because this is something that startup founders face, sometimes they sort of look at themselves, they wake up in the morning and think, oh my God, what am I doing? I don't know anything about this subject compared to these people. Does that ever bother you at all?
No, interestingly, I did a lot of research. So before even starting ALN, I've done a year of research while I was doing a lot of design thinking projects. So going around interviewing users, potential users of legal services, lawyers, I have knocked on thousands of doors of law firms to basically pitch them my, screenshots of the tech platform that I was going to build.
Right, your MVP.
Yes, like super MVP, right? Just to get a feel of what they think. So when that happens, I've got thousands of lawyers who are like, okay, I think that's a good idea. We should get on it, right? And I research not just in Singapore, but across the world. So there's 4 ALNs in every state of the US. There's 120 ALNs in China.
Right, okay. Back up a little bit here, Cherilyn. I want to understand how this happened. You say that you knocked on doors and you just rocked up with your screenshots.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know how many doors you knocked on?
No, I don't remember, but
Give us a rough figure. Are we talking hundreds, thousands?
We launched with 1,000 lawyers.
Right. So how did you you must have hustled like crazy, because I know you talked about your advisors and getting your drive. I want to quantify that somehow so people can understand that it's not just, I'll do that, and then I launched this app and suddenly I'm a billionaire. There's something in between, isn't it? So can you sort of describe what that was like when you were going out and doing it?
So it was just me and my first hire, which was, he was an administrator. Basically, his job is just to make sure I got the list. And then we go on calling all the law firms, getting on meetings, cold calling, find buildings where there are a lot of law firms, many law firms, and I just went down the building and knocking on every single law firm. We have our first name card. It was actually called Lawyerling at the beginning. So Law LI, and then nobody understood that, so we had to change it to Asia Law Network, because then lawyers were like, oh, so this is a law network. So there were all these changes at the beginning that were made from the start, from the get-go. So through really knocking on every single law firm's door, even looking at offices, you know what's going on. You get a feel of who's really on the ground, who are the ones that are using the technology, who are the ones that are answering the phones. We even went down to a law firm to observe. For example, through Shashi, I think we were able to find out like how many hours each person is on the phone, how many hours of meetings they were getting into. From that number of hours of meetings, how many actually converted into, for example, jobs or engagements. And then how can we really shorten that process? And how can we shorten that process without having to cause disturbance? Too much changes, because you're talking about paralegals or even administrative crew or the secretaries who are much older. So, the way that they adopt technologies different.
Right.
And we've created the quick consult such that it's just really green and red buttons, just so that it's just two big buttons, right?
Yeah.
Click one or the other. So all these user testings were done from the start. Like, we didn't waste any time. In fact, till today, I do a lot of the sales or meetings with lawyers myself, because it's so important for me to find out what they really feel. And it gives me an idea of like what we have to build moving forward.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes a great entrepreneur as well, is that, you know, we have a lot of these conversations. The entrepreneurs that I really like are the ones who can hustle, because, you know, every business fails because of sales. They either have, the sales is lower than the cost is higher than the sales, and that's how they fail. And sales is the lifeblood of the business.
Yes.
To get out there and sell, it's not just about revenues, but you've identified it, Cherilyns, that it's about getting insights. So it's a huge part of it, because when you go out into their office, you're away from the screen, you're seeing in the real environment, and you're observing things. And you look at the course of any, you know, successful entrepreneur, whether it's Steve Jobs or it's Richard Branson or it's, you know, Tony Hsieh from Zappos, they live out there in the front line and go to, you know, where it's happening, whether it's the retail store which they own, or the, you know, spending time with people. But you seem quite comfortable in that environment, whereas, you know, I wonder if you came from a law background yourself.
Yeah.
You've been used to like the air-conditioned offices, and I'm very comfortable here. I have everybody running around for me. But you seem to like going out there.
Yeah, I like going out there. It's not so much the law environment. I think it's about the fact that we have nothing to lose. You know, I can ask, and if I get rejected, I get slammed on, or they say that they're busy, but at least I tried. In fact, I tell people that, you know, not everyone's going to love your product. And there is a segment that you have to serve, right? And maybe they won't love it now, but doesn't mean that they won't take it up later. So don't take no as an absolute, right? Or maybe I'm just really optimistic. I don't take no as an absolute, because we've seen so many cases where, you know, lawyers will say no, but then, you know the adoption curve, right? So you have the 15% that comes in, and later on everyone's like, oh, okay, since they're in, I have to be in, right? So there's all these emotions at play where it comes to our psychology at play, where it comes to a product. And sometimes it's not, you have to identify what that motivation or that fear is. Sometimes it's fear, sometimes fear of not knowing, fear of losing out, fear of not being able to learn. So some people don't adopt technology because they just are worried that they'll fail at the technology,
and look
right?
stupid.
So we spend a lot of time training, you know, people in the law firms to use the technology. We'll go through, for example, if it's the first quick consult, we go through it with them. We make sure the call goes through. We ask them for feedback before, during, after. We do that with the users too.
Are you involved in that process?
That was the last thing I outsourced.
Right.
So it was until recently that I actually let go of that process.
Yeah.
So
that's the right way to do it, isn't it? You learn the process. You learn then the template. Then you can outsource that.
Exactly. And always looking to scale from start. So the platform is going to be in 5 languages, and we're launching within the month in 5 languages. And the backend system is already in 15 languages.
Excellent. There's a question of the day that I have for you, and I'm really fascinated by your answer. You've already given some clues away to that. Before we do that, let's talk about where you are in your journey as well. Are you raising at the moment?
A startup founder always says we're raising all the
Endless.
time. Yes. We're not looking for money immediately. We're looking for a good strategic investor, or few investors, strategic ones that we can really tap into to grow exponentially.
What would that be? Would that be a law firm? Could be. Is that an option?
Maybe.
When you say strategic investor, you mean somebody who's not just bringing money, they're bringing...
Yeah, relationships. You know, going across, we have to be Asia Law Network, right? And going across the region, you're talking about a lot of unknowns in different countries, because we're not just in common law countries, we're also in civil law countries. And those countries require a different kind of, network, people, and we want to be there.
Right. So in terms of those partners, give us an idea of what kind of people you would like to reach out to you.
I believe it's not just about people with money, but also in professional services, or understand the space a bit more. also businesses that use legal services a lot, or even I think for corporates, we're looking at also even tech partners.
Yeah.
So network companies, tech partners, telcos. I think those will be really, really good strategic partners for us.
Yeah, sure. And what about your team itself? You're recruiting?
Yes.
Okay.
Always.
It's endless, isn't it? I think so. Here's the interesting thing. You're in a space where I think the recruiting must be probably one of the biggest challenges, especially if I know technical aspect you've talked about, trying to get people excited about law, but it's not really about that. It's the bigger mission that you're on, right? And then from the legal side, getting those people to come across, in the same way that you had to go and knock on doors, you have to kind of get out there and educate the market, don't you? What are you looking for at the moment in terms of people joining your team? Are you looking for hard skills particularly?
I think motivation, why they want to be in this journey with us.
Right.
And I strongly believe in team. I mean, when I was in a creative agency, I turned around a loss-making agency into a profit-making agency, just reorganizing the team. And it's so important to love coming to work every day with the people that have your back. So I always look out for team, and people who like that tend to pay a lot more responsibility and respect to, the coworkers, and making sure that it's an environment that they want to be working in. With regards to hard skills, well, nothing cannot be learned. So that's what we strongly believe in.
Right.
Actually, the team, if you think about it, recently we recently had 2 legal hires, but before this it was all non-legal. And in terms of marketing, it runs like a normal business, right? So you need your marketing people, you need your tech, you need someone who does product, takes care of customer service especially. So as long as they care about the problem enough to want to do that, I think
that's more important than the fact that they have a legal background or they have a specific technology that they can develop, right?
So for tech, it's more specific, but other than that, it's pretty okay.
I mean, you said motivation and the people who wake up in the morning and want to come and put a dent in the universe.
Yes.
How can somebody be as motivated as you? Because I mean, I look at what you've achieved; it's just phenomenal, and it's really inspiring what you've done with the business. And you've gone into a new space. You've not been afraid of challenging. And you've converted and you convinced people with your vision of what you want to do. And you went out there and you beat the street. You went out and knocked the doors. And that's the hardest part. But it's only a special type of person that can do that. And it's not, okay, motivation is one part of it. But sure, your standards for yourself must be really high. How do you then compare, when you recruit people and they're, maybe not the kind of people that can do as much as you or knock on 1,000 doors, or maybe they are out there, but they're very, very few of them. So how do you sort of manage your expectations in that sense? Because then will people ever be as motivated as you?
So I'm sure there are people who would be less motivated and they will have a role in the company, for example, for a while. But I'm looking for long-term motivation. So people who really want to make a dent, they will end up doing it.
Right.
So the key is for me to create that safe environment for them to do so. So for example, I think the way I lead is slightly different from others. I look for diamonds in the rough, I'd say. People who already have that no fear, and I tell them there's nothing. Well, if we don't do well for this pitch, doesn't matter. We have the next one. We have like thousands ahead, right? The key is not for me to just pick on what they don't do, but also to grow with them in this journey. So a lot of my time is actually spent on communicating. So I spend a lot of time communicating with my team on a day-to-day basis, what we have done, and I encourage all of them to share what they're doing on a day-to-day, because we celebrate each other's success. And we celebrate each other's failures, or we learn from each other's failures. So in that case, then it kind of molds the individual to be different. So it doesn't matter that, that they were worried at the beginning, but as long as they have that mentality that it does not matter, they actually tend to do a lot better.
Yeah. That's great. And when you're recruiting, how do you identify that when somebody sits across for you? Because everybody polishes up well at interview, right? And they've all got great CVs and they're all changing the world. Is there something specific that you look for when you say diamonds in the rough? Obviously you've got a good eye for it. Just sharing that, or is it just a case of I'll make a few mistakes and I'll get the right people.
Yeah, I had to learn along this journey. And one of the key things I look out for is, so I'll ask this question, right?
Yeah.
Would you like to test working with us for 2 weeks? Well, the people who are really excited will jump on it immediately.
Let's do it.
And then I'll see
Let's
during
do it
this.
now.
Yeah, let's do it now. Right? The people who have like first choice, second choice, third choice, fourth choice, fifth choice, they won't do it. Right? And if you're not going to be someone's first choice, don't take it.
Yeah.
Don't take it. I'd rather wait. I'd rather wait for the right person. But of course, it's not so much waiting, but, you know, actively getting to know people and finding them. And I start with always talking about the vision, because if I don't see, you know, that interest in them when I talk about the vision, then it's also a sign.
Yeah. That's a great place to start. It cuts out all the time wasters as well, and wasting your own time.
Yes. And if not, it's fine, because if it's not a good match, at least they know about us.
Yeah.
And then they move on.
Yeah, they might come back as a client.
Exactly.
There you go.
Yes.
Cherilyn, it's been fantastic. A real privilege. I feel like, you know, inspired by your energy. And I feel like I need to raise my game in here right now. I mean, that's one of the reasons I do it. I get to meet amazing people like yourself. So, and thanks for coming on to the show today and sharing your journey. Yeah. And it has been a real journey for you as well. And before you go, I mean, the question of the day, I can't forget to ask you this. And I'm really, you know, curious about your answer, is that if you sat with your 18-year-old self, and you were to advise yourself, it might not be an 18-year-old Cherilyn, by the way. So anybody in that situation starting out, knowing what you know now, is there any kind of advice, career advice, that you could offer yourself? It's always the cliche, you know, feel faster to get there faster. But I think at 18 years old, don't think too much in terms of like what you need to do next. Right. Just go in and do it, because when you're doing it, you'll know whether you love it or not. You know whether you can spend the rest of your life doing this. And when you're doing it, you also know your strengths and your weaknesses. And that's where we learn. It's always a journey about learning about yourself and polishing up yourself, right? In the end, and giving that best at that point in time to the company or whatever you're doing at the point in time. So we're always on this journey. So the key is, how then are you able to give your best? So you give your best when you know, and you have to listen to your guts. So that's really one thing that I would tell my 18 years old. Because when you're 18, you try to rationalize, right? You're thinking, oh, I should do this because that's what people are doing. Yeah. I should do this because that's what my parents told me. But I think you know it when something is right or wrong. Like, oh, you should date this person, right? Because this person seems nice. Right. But if you don't have that chemistry, it's not going to last. You've got to make a few mistakes as well, right? It's never the first one. Yes. You've got to get through some of the frogs and the toads to get to the princes. But I think your point about it's not do or die at an early stage. And what I love about your story as well, Cherilyn, is that people need those stories, especially in a place like here in Singapore. Not just Singapore, but in Asia. People need to hear your story, because I think that gives them confidence when they're banging their head against the wall, because they've got parents saying, do this, do that, and the expectations of all their friends and family that, oh, no, you don't want to do that. You don't want to risk your pension, or you don't want to risk your career. But if they see stories like yourself, they understand that it works out, that they can follow this path, that maybe they have this calling inside of them, which is not resonating with the people around them. Yes. And they feel maybe a little bit stuck. Yeah. But then listening to your story, that might be the seed planted in their head that blossoms into something amazing. I hope so. Because in the end, you're only responsible for yourself, right? Exactly. In your life. So no one's going to do that for you. So great. Cherilyn Tan, everybody. Fantastic. CEO of Asia Law Network. Thank you for sharing your journey today. Please come back in the future and update us on that journey. It's been spectacular. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you. Me too. I would hope to hear more about you. Yeah. On the next one. Let's switch seats. Yes. Thank you, Cherilyn. See you.